Hello, everybody. It's Brian, Mr. Betcher, and our special friend for Breaksec Education. Mr. Betcher, say something, please.
Hello. Can you hear
Excellent.
me?
Audio works.
All right.
Yes, 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 yes. Um, so, for those of you who are on our Discord, I made a grand announcement, which I jinxed myself by doing. I was saying, oh, at 3 o'clock Pacific on Thursday, we were going to have my good friend Kainu here, who's going to be on talking about Intro to Threat Hunting, which was the talk he gave at Defcon, which was standing room only, is so successful. At 2 o'clock, I started setting things up and my OBS wasn't working. And it was 3 o'clock and he's like, hey, are we going to get started? And I was like, yeah, things ain't working. And could you please come back on Sunday? And he's like, yes, I can do that. So I'd like to thank Kainu for thank you for being so flexible and coming on and hanging out. We're definitely going to talk about some threat hunting today. And for those of you who aren't familiar with how threat hunting works, you're new to the world. I'm going to let Kainu talk about his origin story, and then we will get into it. So, without further ado, Kainu, please, give us a little bit about your origin story, how you got to be where you are today, and your thoughts on threat hunting in general.
Yeah, man. Thanks. Yeah. So my name's Kainu. My big thing is I grew up uh, loving movies, right? As a '90s kid, Jurassic Park, Tron, Hackers, Sneakers. Those movies made tech and security feel larger than life, and they sparked curiosity early on. So, I mean, I ended up like my dad was a community college teacher and ended up teaching a lot of computer classes. So he'd bring home old computer parts, and I ended up building my first computer when I was 4, and ended up finding out, oh yeah, I guess I wrote my first program when I was 8. So I've always kind of been in tech. Um, that curiosity, playing video games, building computers, and making them feel better or perform better, ended up growing into a career. So I've spent the last 18 years in IT, and the past 6 years specifically focused on digital forensics, incident response, vulnerability management, and threat hunting. So my current role, I not only deliver those services to clients, but I also work with organizations to build and establish their own incident response teams, to give them a chance to, essentially learn what I have been able to glean over my many years of experience.
Very cool. Okay. All right.
Nice. You mentioned movies. I think every episode of Star Trek has some sort of
Mm.
security vulnerability going on.
Yeah,
Otherwise, there wouldn't be a show. Like the whole plot
right.
revolves around, oh, they broke into the computer system and infiltrated the whatever, and they took out our
Array
leader's brains.
system.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Every episode. If you really sit there and think about it, there's always a vulnerability somewhere, right?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. My dad was a huge next gen guy, so
Yeah,
like
that's right.
that was it's funny because I was always more of the Space Wizards Star Wars kind of kid, and but I
Oh,
I, I
me.
learned to appreciate later in life going back and watching Star Trek and going, "Hey dad, it's actually a pretty good show."
Look, Star Wars had their vulnerabilities too. I mean, the Death Star
Sure.
had several glaring
Oh yeah.
vulnerabilities, including physical security issues. I mean, so
Well, I mean, the worst part about it is they didn't learn their lesson 3 times. So, I
okay.
mean, the main portion of the pickerel model that, in my opinion, is the most important is lessons learned. Someone didn't get the memo.
Right, right. Well, they did. They were just like, oh, I know what we need to do. Let's make it bigger. And they tried that twice, and it
Right.
just didn't work. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. It was only
Exactly.
modularizing the Death Star technology into the well. I'm ruining it for Episode 9 fans, but
Well,
you know,
even on what was it? Return of the Jedi, Jabba the Hutt's
Mm,
palace, right? Got infiltrated.
mm,
right,
So they
mm,
had a Trojan living off the land inside.
exactly.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
And even a time bomb as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, thermo
Mm,
detonator. Yeah.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. So you've been doing this for a while. You've you know,
Yep.
and you're fairly successful at what you do. How has it changed? How has threat modeling or threat modeling, threat hunting changed for you, or in since you've seen it since you started versus now? What has been some of the biggest differences? And please don't say AI, because it's changed a lot of things. But I mean, other than AI, maybe what has been some of the biggest changes you've seen with regards to threat hunting?
I mean, as far as threat hunting goes, a lot of the things, we've seen the change from just monitoring firewall logs to,
Hmm.
um, and more of AV, signature detections to now behavioral things. So moving in, oh, hey, back in 20, gosh, like 14, 15, I think, I was dabbling in carbon black.
Okay.
And, you know, wow, okay, this has actual behavioral detection signatures. This is way cooler. What is this thing? And so seeing that vast array of tools kind of expand and Sims come up and Sims come down, and people are like, oh no, Sims are replaceable now. I don't agree with that, but um, seeing these different tools and the flashy, bright things that are trying to come out and change things that are quite simply, people don't understand the fundamentals first. And so
Sure.
they think tools right now can replace a lot of the human uh, functions of threat hunting, automated threat hunts, and things like that. Now there's a place for that. There totally is. But I'm kind of more of the. You guys ever seen? We'll pull back to movies. Iron Man 2,
Yeah.
where the drones, and he's like, drone better, and oh wait, nobody beats Iron Man than Iron Man, and Iron Man destroys all the bots, right?
Right.
Kind of like that, right? There's a place, but there's still a place for the man in the cockpit, right?
Sure.
So
Sure. That makes sense. Uh, has the so I'm gonna go back to the same question, but it's
yeah.
how much has it changed since everybody started putting AI into everything?
Oof. Um, that is actually a super good thing. So with the benefit of LLM engines, the disparity between knowing different query syntax for different tools has been a huge advantage. And I mean, I use it all the time. Since I go into environments and clients environments, I don't remember off the top of my head exactly every language syntax,
Hmm.
because a query in this tool is going to be completely different. You know, oh, that has to be in caps or has to be, formatted this way in this other tool. And leveraging LLMs does definitely helps with that. So, and knowing there's certain things with AI, in my opinion, that aid hunting, but don't replace hunting.
Right.
So if you leverage it as a tool, okay, I know this type of threat attacker, I have this specific ID or this TTP, like, how is this going to help me, or how do I hunt for that type of thing? And learning from it, I think, is definitely the benefit. I think threat hunting can be more approachable with LLMs. And I think that's a really good thing, right? So for mom and pop shops that don't have all these fancy bells and whistles, having an ability to still go in and conduct 30-minute little threat hunts to just kind of get their feet wet is still very approachable, and is more so now than it ever was.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah.
I agree with that.
Mr. Betcher, you've done a
Thank
little
you.
bit of Mr. Betcher, you've done a little bit of thread hunting yourself. I'm sure we can talk about methodologies here. I think that would be something we can talk about as well. Um, as a little background, this talk that Kainu May gave was at Defcon, and we wanted to make sure that we got some of the content that was involved in the PP in the slides and all that. That is also going to be available on a GitHub for the Blue Team Village at some point in the near future, if it isn't already by the time this has gone out. But we wanted to make sure that we got that information out, because I think it was very popular between your talk and the one that had AI Blue Team in it. I don't know what it was about, but it had AI and blue team in it, and it was like standing room only again. So I think it was just because it had AI in it, not necessarily blue team, but everybody was like, if it had AI in it, I want to be at it. And we had a number of people who were like, oh, I waited 2 days for this talk. I can't get in. I was like, sorry, get there earlier. Sorry, you know. So are there, you mentioned Pickerel earlier in terms of incident response stuff, but is there more than one way to threat hunt?
Yeah. There's definitely ways to threat hunt. I've got that in my talk and my slides.
Yes, please. Let's go ahead and start sharing slides. If you want to jump around, we don't have to
Yes.
do it in any kind of linear order.
Okay.
Crossing my fingers to make sure this shit works.
Let me see if I can get my share going here.
If you, it should allow you to, yes, I will allow you to share. There you go. Give it a shot.
Okay. So sharing, we are going to see. Well, which PowerPoint window is it going to show?
You must choose, but choose wisely.
Yeah, it doesn't actually show me which one. All right, it says PowerPoint unknown. Awesome. We're gonna wing it. We'll see if it shows the slide deck or
shows customer information.
No, it won't be that.
I know.
All right, let's see. Which one is this? Here we go. Hold on. I normally don't use Zoom on this system. So.
That's okay. You'd be surprised. We're moving to we're using new tools at work, and I've used Zoom since 2017. We got folks that have never used Zoom before, so I get to teach people how to use Zoom. So
fun.
Yeah.
Let's see if this works now.
Oh, there it is. There it is. Yes. Beyond the alert.
All right. Cool.
Yes.
All right. So, let's see if this works the way I want it to. All right. Cool. So, again, this is my slide deck. So, do you want me to do the normal? Or you want me to jump around?
I think we can go ahead and start with what threat hunting is. I do have a question in here about definitions about because some people have different ideas of what threat hunting is. I actually considered threat hunting and threat intel kind of two sides of the same coin, but I would love to hear your thoughts on what threat hunting is.
So essentially what this talk was really about is what threat hunting is, why we should threat hunt, how threat intel feeds into threat hunting. So kind of your point is it's symbiotic. Right. And there's multiple layers here that are symbiotic. So how threat hunting leads to DFIR, so digital forensics incident response. I have a 365 threat hunting demo that we can do. Okay. It's doing a little evil jinx with Purview. Okay. And then I've got a bunch of learning resources. So through this, we use, what does ChatGPT tell us? Cyber threat hunting, according to ChatGPT, is the proactive search for hidden threats in an organization's environment, even when there's no obvious signs of an attack. Instead of waiting for alerts or alarms, threat hunters actively seek out signs for compromise, malware, insider threats, or unauthorized access before they cause damage. Okay, well, that's pretty darn close to, in my brain, what makes sense. However, here's my view of this is more philosophical. So threat hunting doesn't have a limitation behind cyber threat hunting and physical security. It includes physical security just as much as any digital security. It's looking for both insider threat and all aspects of an organization, and even some that aren't organizations. But basically what I've got here is to see what is hidden. One must understand what should be seen. or what yeah. For evil rarely enters loudly. It wears the mask of the familiar. Only by knowing what is normal can we recognize when the mask begins to fade. So what I'm meaning by that is, if anybody's taken any SANS classes, right, knowing normal to find evil,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so my view of threat hunting, there's multiple methodologies, and I utilize several of them, and we can talk about those in a second. But as far as threat hunting, what it is, it's finding things and activity before it becomes something worse, much worse, right? It's maybe that's not even, maybe that's just OSENT and footprinting your own organization, right? Technically kind of threat hunting, right?
Right.
We're looking for vulnerabilities that may be targeted, that the organization is vulnerable, and it's also assistance and validation for vul management, right? So when we're looking for things, what would that attack look like, right? So we have a vulnerability. It hasn't been patched. It can't be patched. Could we work with a red team to maybe do some purple teaming to see what it looks like to hit that? And then at the same time, while we're doing that, can we footprint to see what that alarm would actually look like should it occur? And so now we're aiding, not only getting information from Intel, we're not only working with vul management, we're also working with a red team or an attack team to essentially validate mitigation or alerting mechanisms, so detection engineering as well.
Right.
And if there is a detection, that could lead to several correspondence with other teams. So I'll get into more stuff in a second there, but that's essentially, what do I think threat hunting is? That's what it is to me, right?
Okay.
So why should we threat hunt? Gaps in traditional security tools, right? Mean time to detection, so MTDD, is often too long. So if we focus on only having detection engineering, we may miss something. There may be constant dwell that maybe we didn't know about. And threat actor sophistication with living off the land techniques is really, really hard to detect if it's not a piece of malware, if it's just behavioral analytics. Maybe it'll catch it, maybe it won't. And it's also to make sure that we're in compliance and industry best practice, right?
Right.
So when we talk about the symbiosis between the different departments, our talks this year, we kind of decided to design this fusion wheel. And so all of the different talks this year, we had a threat intel, we had a threat hunting, we had an incident response, we had a digital forensics, and I think we had a reverse engineering. Maybe we did, maybe did. I don't remember who did. We did that one or not. But as the team goes, we understand that all of these were symbiotic to each other. Threat intel feeds threat hunting. Threat hunting leads to an incident response. Hopefully not, but probably does if there's a detection. And then from that incident response, there's digital forensics that are going to be collected. And let's say there's a payload that could lead to reverse engineering. The identification from both the digital forensics aspect, the incident response, and the threat hunting all pool up with reverse engineering to threat intel to allow consistent hunting. So it's a full circle of how these functions work. So if you have an organization where so essentially it's a cycle, right? And
Right.
so to your point, these pieces talk to each other. Absolutely. Hopefully you have a team that's large enough to handle each one of these, but maybe you don't. But knowing that there's similar phases to the pickerel model, right? Or if we're using this, that there are similar phases to these roles and opportunities for learning, right?
Right.
So it's not just we're doing security things, right? These are traditionally separate roles, but can be facilitated by a single individual or maybe a couple. So methodologies. The main three that I focus most of my time on are hypothesis driven. So MITRE, threat intel, TTPs. So things we know about. Data driven, so anomalies, baselining, we know what our environment is like. And then IOCs, hashes, domains, IPs. So that's pretty much the main methodologies that I will use conceptually.
Do you use these? Do you
Mhm.
use these in any particular order? Does it depend on the threat actor? Does it depend on the data that you have? You're like, well, this
Yeah.
type of data would be more, closely driven to IOC driven, or we have all these, we have certain TTPs and we want to match them to a certain threat actor. Does it matter that way?
Yeah. So they may lead to each other in
Hmm.
certain situations, right? So if we see something that's a behavioral thing where we go, hey, we saw this specific piece of code, and we know that this may be related to something else. This may be a toolkit or a snippet of code that was commonly used by an attacker that was documented on somebody's blog that we got from threat intel. And we know the other TTPs that they use are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right?
Right.
So that leads us back to MITRE and looking through, what things could they be capable of? But that also brings up the point of, well, what if we see nothing, right? How do we start? It's about knowing about the organization. It's about knowing what does the business care about,
Mm.
right? And so if we find out, I think one of the things that we have a lack of communication, just basically in the industry, is working with the rest of the business and listening. So understanding business continuity plans, disaster recovery plans can oddly, one would think, oh, that's not going to really be super helpful for threat hunting. Yes, it is, because we know what's important to the business. They've literally told us in those plans, right? And so if we have server infrastructure or service infrastructure that's important, we know to prioritize certain pieces, right?
Right.
And from that, it really comes down to if we should find that our industry is, I don't know, critical infrastructure, pick something, healthcare,
Right.
right?
Right.
We know that a specific threat actor is attacking United States-based healthcare. We know that we identify who this threat actor is. We know then what type of things they're capable of doing, what their attacks look like traditionally, right? Because we've seen them elsewhere. And so we can use that threat intel to then hunt for the same type of behaviorals within our environment. So if that includes, hey, red team or a pen test team that's a third party, come in and test this stuff so that we can also validate our rule findings for behavioral detections, for detection engineering. But in general sense, if we don't have any of that capability, then we're hunting based off of what we know this attacker to act like, right? We know we have from our vuln management team, we know we have these vulnerabilities. What would it look like if these were actually pop? If I was the attacker, how would I manipulate this environment? How would I exfiltrate the data?
Mm.
And essentially, it's thinking red to do blue.
Right. Right. So you were talking about vulnerability management. A lot has been made of the CISA KEV, which is known exploited vulnerabilities, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Are those the kinds of sources you would use to maybe start your threat hunting? Like, oh, we've seen this vulnerability. We have the KEV, we pull it down in RSS. We have these, vulnerabilities in our environment. It could be used by these threat actors, or is it, hey, like you said, you used healthcare, certain actors, bears, pandas, etc., midnight blizzard, scattered spiders,
Yeah.
those kinds of things. They hit different industry verticals. Sometimes they hit more than one industry vertical. When you said what the business cares about, what the business knows, but let's say you're coming in cold, it's a new customer. It's like how much,
Yeah.
is it interviews and stuff like that? I mean, what does an engagement
can
look
be.
like in that way?
I mean, typically how I start stuff out is first understanding industry. I mean, that is a huge aspect. So using CISA's known database, that's a
Right.
definite huge plus. But knowing the industry, knowing information, so starting an interview, knowing what infrastructure is in the environment, um, because essentially you don't know, you can't secure what you don't know. You can't monitor, you can't hunt,
Right.
right? So if you don't know a specific piece of infrastructure is in play, you don't know that you have the capability of reviewing said things. All of a sudden, a client goes, "Oh yeah, we have Umbrella." That would have been great to know, like, I don't know, during the interview process, right?
Right.
Um, or Zscaler, right? Like, or we have conditional access policies that do this and that and limit accessibility. So knowing what you're about to get into as you start like a client engagement essentially is definitely a huge portion of that. Footprinting is also, what is the exterior vulnerability, what kind of services are they using, mail systems, things like that, that are visible to the outside.
Okay. Cool.
You could also do like access reviews as well,
Yes.
and also benchmarks. Like you benchmark the
Mhm.
system. That plays along
Yep.
the same line as doing a baseline, right?
Yeah, and that's like a huge thing with firewalls, right? Or just simple systems of, with some of these next gen systems and more capable EDRs and things that have a learning mode for behavioral, knowing normal to find evil. Once again, imagine that we know this is what the user's activity looks like. Should something fall out of that, that is an alert and alarm essentially for us to go in and dig in. Why are they doing this? If that's an interview with the user, or if that's, a review of logs and we pull and start looking at, hey, a file dropped on this system. Let's go pull the MFT and see if we can dig into where it came from, right?
Hmm. Very good. Okay. I'd just like to ask people who are watching on YouTube or Twitch, feel free to ask questions. That's what we're here for. I don't know as
Yeah.
much as Mr. Betcher and Kainu about thread hunting, so I'm asking dumb questions. Please feel free to ask dumb questions. There are no dumb questions in this case. It's just questions. So feel free to ask.
Cool. All right. I'll keep pressing forward here. We're
Yes,
good.
please.
All right. So example of hypothesis thinking. So what if user is accessing a file at odd hours from a foreign IP? Well, there you go. That's probably something we should look at, right? So that baselining, that footprinting of users internally. What if they're a sign of credential stuffing against a VPN? Probably, again, something, if we're getting some pretty high alarms on something like that, probably should look into, and maybe it skips hunting completely because we can immediately identify a source IP as malicious and we start doing an actual IR. But that is the essential event analysis function can include hunting, right? So whether that be a portion of the SOC, or maybe there's no alarm at all and we're just seeing it in the logs. Why isn't that alarm working? Why didn't the SOC get notified this is actually happening? So it's where the systems should fail that the humans pump in, right? And that really does encompass a lot of threat hunting, is where these trusted systems, similar to Jurassic Park, right? We need a manual switch to go flip the system back on.
Right.
The system has died. It doesn't work that way. So I really like using Jurassic Park as a great analogy for IT and cybersecurity, because everybody thinks, oh yeah, sci-fi movie with dinosaurs. And it's like, no, that's an insider threat and hacker movie. Like that thing is awesome. And we lose that in all the other films of Jurassic Park. So,
So I have a question. So you
yeah.
made I don't want to say you've made a lot of assumptions, but let's say, how many companies do you come into that actually have their monitoring set up properly and set up correctly so that they can do things like hypothesizing and odd hours, foreign IP access or credential stuffing against this? it's 2025, and I still have the belief that there are companies out there that still don't know how to set up a sock correctly, or they're, they have you're going to walk into their sock and they have 1,000, bleeping red messages, and oh yeah, we know about those. Those come up every, 5, what on average do you see that? I mean, or is it like, okay,
Yeah.
before we even start doing threat hunting with you, we need to get your shit in order?
Yeah, that's way more common than you would think. You're probably spot on. It's I don't know how many times I've walked into a place and it's just been alarm fatigue nightmare.
Right.
And that's typically where, for what I specifically do, we come in typically probably with our own tools, right? So as a third party, if we can help clean up, but it really depends. In the fact that a lot of these organizations don't know how to start, it comes down to alert fatigue is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I would recommend, if someone is struggling with, setting up a SOC or something like that, to seek help, right?
Right.
It's okay. It's not your fault, right? This is a problem that exists everywhere, but getting, research and study and finding out what people are doing well helps. Training helps. There's tons of really good resources. I know, like Threathunting, for example, has a SOC simulator now. Fantastic for that. With alarm fatigue, the thing there is threat hunting does aid in that, and that's the documentation of what something that's normal, right? And documenting that process and really getting it comfortable with the team that, hey, this thing that normally trips off this alarm in this tool, yeah, that's totally fine, but don't tune it in a way where it silences it for everything else. It's very important to be very granular with the tuning of the alarm mechanisms. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, perfectly. It's like when you have that going on, there is a root cause to
Yeah.
that. And it's typically a lack of security knowledge. It may not be the team's fault, but it may be leadership's fault, right? So, but yeah, it's typically organizations just don't know what to do in those situations. They don't have the background to be able to suss that out.
Right. And that comes into play where, some leaders that are really focused on metrics that are showing, hey, we're resolving, all of these tickets. Well, no, you have a tuning problem and you're resolving all of these alarms. It's not that you're actually, it's not that it's nothing. It's not that you're doing anything about it. You just have really bad tuning. So if, it really depends on the situation. But I think for a lot of organizations, they don't understand how special they truly are, right? Because I've got a lot of experience in healthcare, and trust me when I say it, medical infrastructure is written like malware, plain and simple. Things do things that you wouldn't expect them to behave certain ways, and they like, oh, well, how's that using that? And it does weird calls, and you'll see a system go, oh, I'm talking to Japan, and realize, oh, they're not actually talking to Japan. They're talking to an IP that GE owns, and it's in Georgia.
Right. Yeah.
And going down the rabbit hole. And that's the thing. And we'll get to that in a second, but that is a huge piece that a lot of teams get discouraged by, is failure. Right. And that's not failure. It's understanding your environment better, right? That's what it comes down to, is being more comfortable with what your environment looks like. And leaders need to realize that is a huge piece of tribal knowledge that needs to get documented. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah, moving forward, talk about the pyramid of pain. So David Bianco, I believe, is where we have the TTPs being nested at the top, but essentially, how difficult are these things to find for threat intel to lead us to hunt?
Oh, yeah.
Hash values, super easy. IPs, a little bit different, but they change constantly, right? Domain names, that's pretty helpful. Network host artifacts and PCAPs and things like that. Our tools, we actually know what type of tools an attacker will use, what type of payload, or, hey, I know Akira uses this very specific reg key, right? And I can spot it in any system because I know they have a very specific signature. And then that comes up into TTPs as well.
Right.
So knowing some of that and how that stacks up is definitely a big play, right?
Yep.
So talk about how does threat hunting feed, or how threat intel feeds threat hunting. So threat intelligence provides insight to potential attack vectors and enhances threat hunting efforts by identifying emerging threats or areas within your environment that may be targeted, right? So it just basically it's the feeding ramp of getting a lot of information that's coming in about new and emerging threats versus different threat actors. It definitely is what aids threat hunting, not in the fact that it's the single feeding factor, but it definitely is the one that is updating more frequently as these things occur, right? We're always going to have this knowledge of, okay, this is a behavioral thing, PowerShell shouldn't be running on this system, we're hunting for it and things like that, or here's this weird Python script, we're going to be hunting for that type of stuff. But as things are new and they're getting created and these things are coming down the pipe, at one point it all was threat intel, right? So all of this knowledge that we now know today, at one time it was intelligence that was coming in.
Right.
It's before it becomes comfortable to hunt, right? And so we may not have a documented point of, hey, command line misuse came into us at this day and this timestamp into our threat intel. At one point it did, right? It should have, but maybe our birth of our organization wasn't, that old or something, right? So,
yep.
And then what is the difference between threat hunting and defer? So the color thing here, if this looks weird to anybody, it calls back to the fusion wheel, so that's why there's the green and the yellow. So threat hunting, think of threat hunting as the patrol that looks for the signs of danger before anything goes wrong, right? Maybe there is something that's going wrong, but hey, we're seeing that window over there kind of looks open. I don't know if it was broken into, but it's open. Maybe I should find out if there's anything going on with that window. Versus defer, so incident response and digital forensics, is the fire department. So they come in after the alarm goes off and they start doing an investigation. Basically, it's where, hey, we've had an event and we're now starting to dig in. This is a problem. We've confirmed this was not something that should have happened, right?
Right.
So, where can we hunt? There's so many places. Host logs, Sysmon, win event logs, network telemetry, PCAPs, DNS, NetFlow, cloud logs, Azure, AWS, M365, GCP, identity and access logs, and many more. I mean, I've threat hunted in HR access logs, in door security system logs, in actual closed TV cameras, and watching what an insider threat was doing, right? Those are all aspects of threat hunting. It's definitely something that has a wide encompassing thing. It just depends on the actual applicability to what you're responsible for and have accountability for.
So I have a question here. So this is where I would defer to Miss Berlin because, full disclosure, Blue Mirror has been a sponsor of our show, and they do a SIM logging type tool that they can use put together. You've got these various logs from dozens of places, application logs, EDR logs. You've got all this stuff. I'm sure you have a specific type, or do you use what's available that the company has, or maybe the company doesn't have something yet, or hey, we're looking in 15 different places to kind of correlate our logs and to build that picture that you're needing to build that. Because something that might be in a Windows event log may also show up somewhere else, or there may be two disparate events in three different systems that will give you that information. And looking at the Windows event logs will be like, well, that looks weird, but okay, maybe not a big thing. Maybe it was a big thing over here in this other log, maybe in the application security log. So when you ask them for this data, how likely are they to have this in some place that is in a usable manner?
Because
it feels like there's it feels like that there's a lot of maybe pre-work that has to be done to get them up to a certain level in some cases, because a lot of them don't have the time to be able to do this. So this would be something that was like 300 on their list of 800 items, and they just don't have time to do it.
Right. Yeah, and that is super common. And that's when it comes down to, in a perfect world, we'd have logging on all the things, right? Sure. But it just doesn't happen that way.
Right.
And that's why, as far as client engagements and things like that, going widespread aids, right? Because something may have it. Maybe we don't have a SIM. Maybe we don't have a certain capability of a technical control. So it really does depend on the situation and what you're reviewing. Now, the hope is that if you're going into an investigation, that you have the ability to have retained some of the logging capabilities. So if that means turning a system off, I usually hate that personally, to retain volatile memory. I like to isolate with an EDR typically on investigation functions. If there's an actually popped system, or we have to look at a system that may look anomalous, right? That's more of a deeper side of case. But when you're going into an environment and you don't have any logging capabilities, it definitely is limiting. And it changes the scope of what you're able to see. So knowing the rules for engagement there, and making sure that as far as a consultation, or coming in as a consultant and doing that work, making sure that that's communicated to the organization. Here's what you have visibility for. Here's what we can see. And just being able to accept that what you don't have, you don't have. The retention capabilities, the tools, it may just be a part of the situation, and that's comes down to properly addressing as a consultant that's coming in. Now, in your own environment, right? So if we talk about spinning this stuff up, and maybe I don't have logs, a lot of it comes down to knowing how to pull them in the right time. So let's say we have logs that write over, that's fine, right? We don't have a SIM, but knowing that we can pull down logs, or knowing that we have the ability to do robocopies and offload them off to a file share that's local or something. Security risk, probably.
Right.
But also there's ways to do duct tape. I've got a lot of nonprofit organization experience where I'm used to duct tape. Right. But it comes down to, there are a lot of really, really good open source tools that, in the Blue Team Village specifically, the CTF that we built this year, we used Waza. And Waza has capabilities that some of us were like, oh, wow, that's really cool. This is open source and free. It has threat hunting. It has threat intel. It has baselining. It has CIS benchmark stuff. Pretty crazy to think that some of these open source tools have this. But as far as how do we start threat hunting, is start collecting and start knowing what normal is. And if we can't start retaining some of these things, at least documenting what things look like when you're pulling active logs. hey, I see this IP traffic, and here's all of the normal traffic, and we have a spreadsheet that you pull. Let's say you pull an outbound, you know, web requests or outbound commands that are going outbound, or things that are coming in over non-standard ports, non-web ports, right? And you're pulling some type of metric or something from your firewall, and reviewing that information and then retaining it, so that you can build a baseline, I think is something you could start as. It's going to be really time consuming on some of that. My recommendation would be to look at adding tools that have good return on investment. Don't let the shiny things cloud your judgment. Again, sometimes the free things are really good, and definitely aid in that. I know a lot of organizations that just have like a Defender for Endpoint. Honestly, fantastic threat hunting tool. Defender's fantastic for hunting and doing things. Purview we'll do that here in the demo, but Purview's logging capabilities are fantastic. I can find out how someone accesses every single piece of a mailbox in like 5 minutes. It's fantastic, and it's just knowing these tools that are out there that inadvertently aren't designed as threat hunting tools but can be used as that. So
very cool. Okay. Yeah.
So that comes into the next point, right? You don't need to be a senior analyst to start threat hunting. You need 3 things: curiosity, persistence, and hopefully some hypothesis thinking. So if this were to occur, then I'd look here, right? Or then I would be seeing this type of event, right? Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. So curiosity: why is this happening? Should this be happening? What would I do if I were the attacker here, right? Persistence: you won't always find something. That's normal. It really is. I can't express that enough to people that are starting out in threat hunting, that it is 100% okay to follow that rabbit hole and end up going, this is normal. That's fine, right? You learned something that somebody else in the organization probably didn't know. And at least for you internally, you now have a better understanding of your environment. Knowing normal to find evil. You need to understand what normal is. You can't just assume what normal is, right? Every hunt improves your understanding of that environment. Keep at it. Learning the weird stuff of an environment is how you become dangerous in a good way. Hypothesis thinking again. Start with the simple questions. Are users logged in at weird times? Why is PowerShell running on this server? And then try to prove or disprove it using logs or tools that you have available to you. Again, if it's just an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV file, totally fine. Like, I can't express how useful Excel is at hunting. Like, is it the best tool in the toolbox? No. But is it something that everybody has the ability to access? Most likely, if they're a Microsoft stack. Okay, so use Office Libre or OpenOffice. Same thing. A spreadsheet application of some type of formatting there helps. It really does. Logs can be viewed in several different ways. There's several different free tools and things that you can utilize. Use what's available to you for this. It doesn't have to be, a $100,000 tool off the shelf. It can be stuff that is cheap and simple. Sometimes that's the most effective too. So, right. With that, I'll hold, because that's where we get into the demo here. So,
okay. So those are the 3 things I'm thinking of. How much time are we taking to do these 3 things? And is it, you said sometimes you won't find anything. How long, just like I've worked engagements with people, and it's like they spend 4 days out of a 5 day engagement chasing this one thing. And I'm like, okay, you're going to have to stop at this point and write a report. How long is it before you're like, I'm being too persistent on this one thing, and it's like maybe I should let this go. Is it kind of like working an engagement for like a pen test or something like that, where it's like you've got to figure out when to let that go and go, okay, I'll revisit that later. I need to move on to something else. Or do you actually, is persistence, hey, you just keep digging that down that rabbit hole and hoping that it turns into something? I mean, obviously that's not a good way of doing it. I'm just being facetious here.
There's two ways to answer that. So let's say you're just either sysadmin, security analyst, somebody internal, right? My recommendation on how to approach this and how to use time available for this is find out, again, what's important to the business, and what attackers could be attacking, and get your threat intel, right?
Right.
And I, because of the internal utilization, right, for good ROI here, to start off with, I recommend scheduling, maybe getting approval for 30 minutes to a week, maybe an hour, to just say, hey, I've got, all my assignments done. I've got all my stuff done that is my normal job duties. Maybe you're not a full-time threat hunter, for the organization. Schedule these things out and block your calendar out to go dig, right? And so put that into a little box of saying, here's the time that I have available, where are the places that I can start hunting. And as that grows and as that finds ROI for the organization, that can be, okay, I'm pretty successful in this, and we've stopped things and we've actually seen a return. Maybe to increase that time, right? Maybe that ends up becoming 4 to 5 hours a week, right? Or more. Maybe it becomes a full-time position that you have that much stuff and you're able to provide that much value. And that comes to like organizations. Where do they find this? How do we justify the time being spent on that then? And that comes down to internal teams being comfortable with writing reports and documenting, here's what we looked at, here's what an attacker would have looked like. For example, if we had a POC or an online article, some type of evidence of what an attack looks like, and here's where we looked. Here's, our system is safe. That report, what that gains people typically is the comfort to sleep at night. Right. And so it is an emotional response a lot of the times by executives, right? Whether they want to admit it or not, it is a comfort thing. Knowing that we have somebody that's actively looking for these things does give people a peace of mind. It truly does, and should, frankly. But how do we essentially, kind of going back to your question, as far as like a consultant, how much time do you actually spend going down a certain rabbit hole? I think it comes down to how long the engagement is, right? So whether you're understanding rules for engagement, is this a 6-week or a 6-month threat hunt? And that definitely will change the time windows of having the ability to monitor and look at certain things in baseline. Are you a return? Right? Have you been in this environment before? Have you worked something with this organization before? And do you already have pre-existing knowledge of how their ecosystem is configured? And so a lot of those variables play into determining the amount of time spent on something specific. It may be that an organization is very, very focused on lateral movement capabilities. And so that comes down to looking for those types of attacks and those TTPs. Maybe they put in, the scope of that threat hunt is determine if there is any available lateral movement. So, or was there any lateral movement between users and things like that?
Yeah.
Monitoring the network, making sure do they have ACLs and things set up, and where's the monitoring capabilities there? So I think there's a lot of variables there to not give you like a definitive answer. I think it is more or less similar to a pen test on amount of time for certain things, but it really does factor into what the client is looking for and what the environment's size and aspect. It could be an organization that's 100 people. It could be a manufacturing floor that has, IoT everywhere, right? And manufacturing infrastructure everywhere. And so it definitely depends on the ecosystem.
Sure, that makes sense. And the one thing I was thinking about here was you can use your threat hunting as part of, well, if you're in vulnerability management, you can, say, hey, use this as part of like, hey, we have we're trying to build an inventory of things, not a CMDB, mind you, but, we need to know where we're using maybe this software in the environment so that if we run into this kind of issue or this vulnerability showed up in the KEV, maybe, we need to figure out where this is located. Is this exposed to the internet? Does this, we can use this as a risk mitigation solution, or we can use this for an exercise, a tabletop exercise for IR. Like this is actually on the KEV, and we can do that. And so, part of the threat hunting could be, tied in with incident response, actions or plans, and maybe we talk to IR people who may also be a collateral duty for them, like, oh, I'm the VM team, but when it hits the fan, then I'm part of IR. So there may be other ways of putting threat hunting in your environment in the guise of vulnerability management or incident response or inventory or those kinds of things. So there may be other ways of putting that in. So you're not saying, hey, I'm going to go do this thing, and they're going to be like, well, why? Right. You need to justify your use of time, and you can say, well, I'm doing it for vulnerability management purposes, or I'm doing it for blah, or I'm doing it because I saw this article about this vulnerability that I know we use this in our environment, and we need to know what our risk, strategy is to fix that, or what our risk mitigation is for this thing.
Well, and that comes, it's exactly right. And it comes down to, again, is there an acceptable risk? Right. Has the organization signed off on an acceptable risk? Right. And then because of that acceptable risk, is there a priority or precedent set to hunt on that accepted risk? And so that definitely is an area. I think probably the two most useful things going in as a consultant on where to start looking is accepted risk and vulns. It definitely is something that if you have something that can or cannot be patched and or has been accepted to not be mitigated in some fashion, or is not mitigated in a traditional sense,
right?
Those are definitely areas and vectors to focus on hunting on, for sure.
Right. Cool. Yeah. Very nice. Let's take a look at that demo. I'm sure we can get some questions from folks who are watching the stream, or as we go through the demo.
Right on. So, as this demo is, this is a super plain and simple. We've got an M365 tenant with an Evil Jinx portal. So if anybody is not familiar with Evil Jinx, it is a attacker in the middle WebKit that essentially can bypass MFA. Probably one of the more common styles of attacks in the last few years. I think they're on probably 3 something at this point. I don't know if version 4 is out yet. But what we'll be doing with that is we'll be leveraging a couple tools, again, from 365, and then another one that is a PowerShell module known as Hawk. So we'll get into that here.
I'm so excited we have a demo. We don't have a lot of demos with our interviews. So.
Right on. All right. So we'll see that this was, 7:22. So yep, it's recorded it a while ago at this point. So we're gonna go ahead and import our Hawk module. We're gonna run the command. It's gonna see that it is prompting us to provide an output directory. And as this runs, we're just going to say, hey, we're going to put it in our C users, and I'm lazy, and I put it in the public directory. So it's going to run. It's going to prompt us for credentials and kind of do its jazz. And then we're going to go and look, and we say, hey, look, there's a return file. So we'll see if we can go in and list that down. We see that there's an investigate file, so investigate.txt, but then there's a tenant directory as well. So Hawk itself can be used for direct users, or it can be used on the entire tenant. And so in this case, we ran it against the entire tenant versus focusing on one specific user. And with that, we can see that in this investigate.txt file, we see that there's a simple admin inbox rules that are created. There's a JSON file. There's also a text file, and it says, hey, come look at this. So in that investigate file, it's basically a list of things that you may want to look at. Again, threat hunting, right?
Right.
So we'll take a peek at that. Let's open up that CSV or that JSON data here. And in there, we see that there's a new inbox rule. From that inbox rule, we can see, okay, a weird IP address. Let's go ahead and write that down. I don't know what that is, but 181, if we go run that against abuse IP database or virus total or something, we can see that the name of the inbox rule is ... and it's moving emails that are archived or to the archive directory. Okay, so that's weird on Kevin's account. We see another one. We see a session ID, so that's really important. So let's go ahead and note that down, because that's going to help us for hunting, because session IDs are important in 365.
Okay.
Essentially, a session ID, and we'll pause here and talk about that. So session ID, anytime that there's a session that is started, it's going to get a unique ID assigned to it. So if you go and log in and boom, you have that session ID. If you go to sign out, it's going to create a new session ID or log in from a different system. So it's that logins instance for the most part.
Right.
Simplified, obviously, but we see a second rule, and the subject for this one is anything containing the word emergency. Okay, that's kind of strange. Look at that. Again, moving stuff to the archive. Okay.
And the idea of moving things to the archive is so that you don't initially see it. It never hits the inbox. It goes directly to the archive, and you'd have to know to go look there.
Right. So attackers will typically move things to different directories. They'll move things to the deleted objects, archive. My favorite one's the RSS feed, because then they can yank that out, right. Or just hide it, right? But yeah, putting it in different folders is definitely an easy way to attempt to either obfuscate themselves or hide from the active user. Because during this, we're going to see that Kevin here, so Kevin Flynn, movie reference, obviously. We're going to see that Kevin is also in on his mailbox at the same time that this attacker is, right? Or we don't know it's an attacker yet, but we may find out what is him, what is not. So we know this information. We saw this go bump, right? And we're not sure if this was Kevin. We're not sure. We know that's an IP. That's probably not Kevin. It's never logged in as Kevin, but it's at a weird time. Let's say this is happening. We're reviewing these logs at, a weird time of day. Let's say it's, we're doing a hunt on a Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. Kevin's not in the office. We don't have a way to interview him. So let's see if we can leverage some of the other tools in M365 to help us out. So with that, we're going to bump over to 365 admin portal. We're going to find Kevin Flynn. We'll look at his account. Okay. We're going to see some sign-ins. Again, we see a bunch of really weird sign-ins from that IP. Now, from here, we would have been able to find one really cool artifact, but we're going to wait because we're going to have something else show us. So what we're doing here is we're leveraging Purview and audit inside of Purview. So Purview is the newer portal. I think it came out about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I want to say. I think my face is blurring for some reason. But it is a culmination of what used to be the security or the compliance center in a different new Microsoft flavor for things, right? They love to change names every 6 months, right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to look on Kevin's account, and we're going to look between the time windows that these events occurred. So we're going to specify Kevin's account, and we know between the July 21st and 22nd, and we're going to go ahead and let that query run. So from there, that's going to take a little bit. We've already got one completed, so let's take a look at the one that's completed here. We can see that we can download this, and here's our old friend, Excel.
Yeah.
So in this demo, what I wanted to demonstrate is how useful Excel is in something like this. And oddly enough, the capabilities that this method that I'm about to share with you guys has is it's different. I'll start with that, and then we'll go into why. And the reason why I like using Excel for this very specific type of review of activity, it's because of the find and replace function within Excel. So normally we'd be like, oh, hey, we'll
table, right?
Right. Yep. So we took that CSV and we created a table. So the screen share is not perfect, right? But we created a table based off of that CSV that output from Purview. And in here, we're going to go ahead and look for the things that we know. We know what Kevin's home IP address, and it's somewhere in Montana. So we're going to take that. That is something we know, and we're going to trust it for right now, right? That may change if we determine that Kevin's workstation was popped, but we know some of this activity. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the format and replace. This is super simple. Anybody can do this, but it's effective. What we're going to do with this is actually color everything that's in a cell block. And because of the audit data tab in here is in JSON in the CSV, and it's going to color the entire cell green, not just the word.
Right.
And what we're going to do is we're going to find every single thing. This reason is how we're able to be very quick in the identification of the malicious activity, because we know everything that's essentially from Kevin's IP for right now until we find out otherwise is trustworthy. So we're going to start with that, going, here's what we know, here's what we trust. That may change, but we're going to color all of that green. And remember how we said, let's go record that session ID? Let's go see if any of the green was that session ID. Let's see if any of that was Kevin. We go look, we grab this. And in this case, we're going to change the green and change it to red. Now, one of the things here that we can do is we can always do a find all before we start coloring things, right? So just like a kid's coloring book, we can go look to see what that character is. And in this case, if we have any green return values of that session, we can see if anything is green, right? Because we know that we have a session ID, and we'd also see Kevin's home IP address. And in this case, none of that resolved. So what we've done now, we found it all. We didn't see anything matching, and we had 480 events that are associated with that session ID. So that means we know it wasn't Kevin's home IP, and it's not coming from one of Kevin's trusted systems. And we went and looked on abuse IP, and that IP is malicious. It's actually a Proton VPN IP. Huh. Well, that probably wasn't Kevin. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Let's continue to look and see what else we have. We can see the access token. We can see different device information. We can see the applications. We can see logins. So let's look at some other pieces here. We know we have a unique ID. Let's look at, just because we see some logins. Now, when logins are documented in this data, the operation is just called login, but you actually have to go and look at the application ID for the Entra app to determine what was it, right? Now, if you did this in the GUI, you would probably see the application name. We did see it a little bit ago, but I wanted to show you a different way on how to see it. And so if we go look, we see that the user logged in to this IP address, or from this IP address. And if we go look up that app ID, we see that it was Workday. So the attacker logged into the HR system from this malicious IP. Something that attackers have lately been doing, changing ACH and direct deposit or scraping info out of the Workday system.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Right. So we've got one other SSO app that is stood up. Let's see if we can do a reverse of what we just did. So we found a login, and then we correlated that and matched it to an app ID. Now we know an app ID, and we're going to go see if anything hit that. And that's where things are going to get a little bit dicey. So we're going to type in, we know a couple
app
characters.
IDs be spoofed?
That is a good question. I don't know off the top of my head if they can be 100% spoofed technically. I know that depending on if they're created by or come from the Entra store, or if they're custom, they can change. So if it's a customized application, that can be something very specific, or if it's something that's been added to the tenant through the Azure store or the Entra store. I don't know what flavor they're calling it today. Off the top of my head, I don't think so, but possibly. I mean, I don't see why not. I just personally, I haven't seen it before. So through this, we ended up seeing a login for that ID that we know that we have one other app ID. And when we start looking through, we find out that that was our FortiGate VPN. So this malicious IP now, they use single sign-on to log into our VPN.
That's not good.
Yeah, it was probably Kevin, right? Like, it still could be Kevin, right?
Kevin's the director of marketing. He should not be logging into the VPN, right?
I mean, maybe. Let's keep looking. We know that they were going to the HR system. They were modifying a bunch of rules. They're coming from a Proton VPN IP. So let's look for this session ID and see if we can find when it started, and see if we can find anything related to the beginning of that session ID that's related to this behavior and why this could be, or maybe we can tie it back to Kevin's actual laptop. Nice. But let's see. So if we start going back through, we find out here's all the green, and here's when the red started.
Oh, that's a good
And
idea. Okay, I see the timelining idea here. Okay, that makes sense.
right. And
Yeah,
so with Excel of all things, not only are we seeing all the evil, we're also now, because of the creation date, we're able to timestamp and do timelining. Something that, if you had an advanced sim or you were using Time Sketch to pull these things into, you could totally do that. Don't get me wrong. But this is simple and everyone has this.
right,
It's essentially kind of free. It's that hey, if you have M365, you probably have Excel, right?
right.
That's why all
So
your sims have this button on the right top, export to Excel.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, and it comes back to, you may not be amazing at a sim, probably can get pretty good at Excel.
Right. Well, I actually
And
was talking to somebody from Speaker Ops, and I don't mean to go down a rabbit hole
yeah,
here, but the
yeah,
guy
good.
is a data scientist, and he's been the Speaker Ops like person for 20 something years at Defcon. And we were talking about Excel and getting things into Sim, and I was like, I don't necessarily know how to do a SQL query that could get me the data I want, but if you send me a big glob of data that's in a CSV format, I can put that into Excel
Yeah,
and filter the shit out of that and get exactly what
yeah,
I need
yeah,
in a fraction of the time. And he's like, yeah,
right.
that's because we think differently than, yeah, like a database administrator or something. We want the data and we know how to pare down and to filter out what the noise to get to what we need. Or and with SQL, it's the exact opposite. We need to tell the machine exactly what data we want, and
Want.
it's counterintuitive to how a lot of people have grown up trying to process data. And yeah,
Yeah.
I would love to have that guy on just talk about the psychology of that because I live in Excel. I've lived in Excel for many years. So this speaks to
Mhm.
me very well.
Yeah, and that's why I did this demo, frankly, this way, is because a lot of people that are sysadmins and come over, because I come from that world, this makes sense to
Oh yeah,
not only people that are in the business side and moving over from the business side, but this is easily adaptable for people that have no threat hunting experience at all. They can easily pick this up entry level and accomplish this task. So
exactly.
as we press forward here, we're going to see that, hey, there's right there. Remember how we saw the mailbox rule that was modifying stuff and moving emergency subject line into the archive folder?
Yep.
There's our email. So emergency, please sign in, contact or contract will end. Huh. Well, that's interesting. Let's look at what that is. We dive down into that sucker. We can see, and we can go do, transport and see where, you know, where that message is coming from with Exchange and do all sorts of things. Or if maybe we're not comfortable with that, now I would encourage to pull down this message. You can either use eDiscovery or a number of tools. In this example, we're going to do a way that is not my favorite fashion of doing this, is not the technically recommended way. We're going to use OA and we've delegated ourselves to access this mailbox or OA. I recommend not doing it this way to preserve data. This is just how the demo is because I had to show it in some way. I recommend using eDiscovery, getting legal approval, obviously, and pulling down this this email from eDiscovery with either the message ID. There's a viewer in the security portal. There's different ways on how to pull this message depending on the timestamp of when it occurred. As us going 2 months back, this may have been tampered with. Maybe the user was or wasn't on legal hold or things like that. So for the demo purposes, we're gonna access it in OA. So bear with me. We're gonna look. We're gonna see a bunch of weird messages between not Kainu and Kevin Flynn. See a bunch of weird messages. Just pay the bill, please, and sent it to a bunch of other, Angela Moss and Bob Johnson, a bunch of different people. Huh. That's interesting. Not Kainu. Okay. Oh. Huh. That's interesting. COVID-19 electronic document sent to That's a DocuSign, right? That's interesting. So let's see if it's a phishing email. Maybe it's a phishing email. Maybe this was where this all came from. So if we open that sucker up and we detonate it, now sometimes this works. I will say a fair warning here. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. There are more advanced portals that are coming out that are putting. I know that there was some stuff that I think Amazon just took down here, I think like a week or two ago, of infrastructure for fake Cloudflare portals. There's tons of different ways to do this. And there are mechanisms to detect sandboxing tools. So we're gonna try to run a sandbox here and see if we can detonate this URL. But it is something that we end up when we go and run that URL for that document, and we start poking around, we see that this is an Evil Jinx portal, right? So we were actually successfully able to find that it is the Evil Jinx. Right? Correct. Yep. So they're stealing that session ID and that cookie with the sessions. So that's probably how Bob got popped, or Kevin here. Sorry, Kevin, not Bob. Kevin got popped. I usually use Bob as my analogy. So we're gonna use a really simple script that I wrote that's just gonna parse out JSON data. I think this will eventually be put on my GitHub at some point, but we're gonna use a script that I've called Kainu's Looking Glass, and we're gonna take all of that evil activity that we have, and we're going to put it in a separate CSV, right? And we're going to run the Looking Glass against this CSV and give it an out file. And what it's going to do is it's going to parse out through all of that messy JSON data that we have in Excel, all of the documents and files and emails and IPs from that JSON data. So anything that they touched in SharePoint, any message IDs or attachments from messages, and then also the IP addresses that they were coming from, and parsed out into independent little CSVs to make it easy and digestible for the team to go hunt with. Right? So anybody can write anything like that. I'll have it up on my GitHub eventually. Got to have it go through a check process thing with just a few things, but essentially we can see, hey, here's all the message IDs that the attacker had. Here's all of the files that they exfilled essentially from accessing SharePoint. And a lot of them are just called copy because I just created a bunch of noise. Sure. But that is, the attacker essentially was able to access all of these through that time, which, obviously the attacker was me.
Right.
So, and then in this, the only deviation from this is there are going to be Microsoft IPs in here because there are return values for Microsoft activity when you open up, Word and document files and things like that. So it's going to be the virtual environments from Microsoft. So with that is essentially a really easy way to hunt and then take this data. Here's all this information that we're able to take. So we have, the things that they touched. We dabbled almost in forensics, right? Because we hunted and we kind of saw a life cycle here of it led us to confirming that this was definitely not Kevin Flynn. This is definitely an attacker. We need to hand this off and now move into incident response and forensics, right? To confirm the activity that we saw. And we're able to hand them off this beautiful little package of, here you go. Most of your work's done. Just check it and review. But we did this with the thought of hunting, right? It led us down this journey from us running Hawk to identifying if there's a transport rule. No alarms had been triggered. This was completely invisible to our ecosystem. And we essentially found it from hunting, right? Now, in a normal, well-oiled machine, this would have not gotten passed. There would have conditional access policies to prevent certain services and geolocations. And hopefully you have all that. But let's say you don't. This is very much applicable and a very common style of attack that we're seeing right now in organizations and have for the last couple of years.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. So with that, I've got some additional learning resources and a few more slides to go into, but are there any questions that have come up from any of this?
No, nothing yet. If anybody is lurking and they feel like they want to ask some questions, again, there are no stupid questions, so feel free to ask. I found that so. How do I phrase this? So you would have to know that Hawk exists and Purview exists. Otherwise, your job is, I would say, quite a bit more difficult, correct? So
Yeah.
a lot of this is trial and error, or if you're a junior person, you're going to be shadowing a more senior person. But let's say I just have a home lab and I want to learn how to do threat hunting on my own. How would you suggest going about doing that from a, like, I've got a home lab, or I want to do some threat hunting, but I don't have an M365 with audit logging and E5 and all that stuff. How would somebody go about doing threat hunting or threat intelligence or what have you in that case? Do you have any thoughts or pointers there?
Yeah, and actually, some of my slides cover that, so we'll just move into that, and we'll talk about that. So that's
Excellent.
perfect.
Fantastic.
So additional learning resources.
Yeah.
So here's a plug for Blue Team Village. So Project Obsidian, GitHub, other 101 sources or sessions provided by the Blue Team Village and the Project Obsidian group. I think this URL is dead right now, but we're going to update it. We'll get a better link for you.
Yeah.
This was live during the event. I think it's changed since then, so we'll get an updated one. But we have a lot of resources there.
Yeah, if that link doesn't work, you can just go to github.com, Blue Team Village, and then there's a bunch of repos to other resources, including stuff from Defcon 33, but also previous Defcons that the Blue Team Village has been at. So you'll find something there that will be interesting to you if you are ready for it.
Yeah, I think that would be, a phenomenal place if you're curious on a lot of different things. The Blue Team Village is a huge, wonderful community resource. There's a Discord. There's a huge open community for a lot of that. And so learning from others. And if you have the privilege of going to Defcon and meeting with some of the villagers and stuff, great resource.
Yep.
But for a lot of organizations and a lot of people, that isn't a freedom, right? You don't maybe not have the benefit. So with that, my favorite way of learning is gamified. So just like with red teaming and pen testing, the Blue Team trainings have taken off light speed in the last couple of years. So Blue Team Labs online, Cyber Defenders, Try Hack Me. I took their Cell 1 for their SOC. Fantastic course. Like it's really good. And that being said, Try Hack Me has a lab for a simulated threat hunting, and it's, as far as I know, spin up an account. It's open for, I think, an entry level and a difficult level. They also have a lot of training courses for threat hunting. So between learning security 101 and actually getting into things and hunting, they have exercises on how to do that, and a lot of these others do as well. Hack the Box Academy also has their CDSA. I also took that here this last spring. Fantastic resource and learning material. They teach a lot of I think it's kind of more of an intermediary. I think the SAL 1 is very entry level. The CDSA is kind of middle of the road. But the CDSA resources and some of the learning material from there are fantastic. They do have and touch a lot of threat hunting concepts. Definitely with getting your feet wet there. Hack the Box Labs, so doing CTFs for threat hunting and reviewing some of that. There definitely is that aspect because there's dead boxes, right? You don't know what's going on with the system. You got to kind of find out. Definitely a good place to start. A lot of this gamified stuff is really, really good. OffSec. So if you guys are familiar with like Kali Linux and stuff, OffSec came out with a TH200 course, OSTH cert. So that's similar to their OSDA and OSCP and all that jazz, but they actually do have a threat hunting course and certification now, along with INE, and INE has the cyber threat hunting professional, I think it is, but OSTH and the CTHP or ECTHP, great resources. I would really recommend starting out here, and before you go down in a rabbit hole of your own environment necessarily at, let's say, at work, right, and start hunting things and spending time. I would say if you can afford to get approval in, say, 30 minutes to an hour a week and just start poking around in your own environment at work, fantastic. Like, get approval, start getting things. Maybe you don't have the access to be able to do some of this. And these gamified experiences, as I would call them, and learning methods, you have the access and the availability to do some of the things you may not currently in your current role have access to do.
Yep.
And that's just segmentation of roles, right? So with that,
one of the things I want to bring up about the try hack me stuff, or I'm learning the gamified like Python through boot.dev. Some companies, that's training, and if you have a training budget, you know, if it's $250 a year or something, ask them to reimburse you for that. You know, you can pay for it, then they'll reimburse you, or, you know, find out from your boss if, hey, can you buy me a yearly subscription to try hack me, or something like that. There's a lot of other ways of doing that, you know, that allows you to get access to that training and continual training. You can say it's just continual training that I'm doing that. And a lot of other organizations are cool with doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an awesome point, man. It comes down to, you know, I know with both the virtual environments for threat hunting and the SOC simulator and try hack me, if you end up getting an enterprise account, a lot of those things open up that actually have more than just the 4 options that are free. I think it ends up being like 9 or something each. So if you get those enterprise accounts, those are awesome wins. I would also recommend, if this is something that ends up becoming fun, doing CTFs. I really can't recommend doing blue team style CTFs. You know, I helped out this year. I had the privilege of helping out with Project Obsidian for the CTF this year, and I've been a long time competitor in the Blue Team Village CTF, and you know, it was an awesome privilege to have that experience to help build that this year. We had a great turnout. I think it definitely does help with threat hunting capabilities, but also all facets of blue team. So that fusion wheel that we were talking about, things like that become symbiotic. You learn a skill here and it helps you there, right? Doing the CTFs, these gamified things, all is relative to being able to have gained skill set in a normal day-to-day workload. And then you know, threat hunting, you know, tools and skill sets here help out with, you know, digital forensics, incident response, and knowing how attackers have accidents. So, yeah.
Very nice. Yep.
So with that, we've also got some books that we recommend, or I recommend. Blue Team Handbook, Tribe of Hackers, Blue Team, Cybersecurity, The Beginner Guide. That's a phenomenal one. One that's always in my backpack, like literally a foot away from me, is the Operator Handbook. So that is a culmination of OSINT, Blue Team, and Red Team. So in my brain, it's the big yellow book or kind of the purple team handbook. It's definitely always in my bag. And then I have usually the red team and the blue team field manuals as well. Great reference pieces. I think everybody in the industry is very familiar with those. And then also the foundations of threat hunting as well. Phenomenal resource. There's a bunch of blogs here, open threat research, threat hunter playbook, fantastic place to go start digging around and seeing how threat hunters work. Hold My Beer Security, awesome cybersecurity, really good resources there. And then the D for Diva is always a pleasure to poke around on. And so, yeah, that's pretty much that presentation. But yeah, there's the Discord, and any feedback, feedback-obsidian.blueteamvillage.org. So yeah.
Yeah, the Discord would be like the Blue Team Village 365 days a year. So you can go and join that and network with folks and get ready for Defcon 34 that will be available. So, yeah. Cool. Right. Yeah. Mr. Betcher, what are your thoughts? You've been very talkative. I want to make sure that you get in your discussions or points.
No, that's really great, especially the resources. A lot of people watching this program are beginners and they need to know where to start. That's one of the most common questions I get. How do I start? Right. It's tough. It's tough to tell people, oh, well, where do you start? I mean, things evolve quickly. And so if someone wanted to get into forensics, they could actually dig into one of those resources that you have and get a certification or take a class, do some training online, read the books, right? Buy the RTFM or the BTFM. Start learning those and at least being able to quickly reference them because they've been over it before, and play around. Play around in whatever environment you have access to and see, poke around and see what you think.
So I hate to put on, man. It's great. Yeah, it was an excellent talk. I'm glad we were able to spend time today doing this. I do have a couple more questions, and I have to put on my manager hat here because learning how to generate metrics has come hard to me, and because dashboards suck for me, it's one of those things where I then have to take the data that I have from my Excel spreadsheet and then put it into something useful. Pivot table, pivot table, pivot table. So you're doing threat hunting at work. Let's say you're doing it for your company. You may not, I don't know what the size of the company is, and your engagement with a company is different. You're a third party, you're a consultancy that comes in and they've noted the deficiency. They don't have the capabilities, or even like Mr. Betcher said, they don't even know where to start, right? So they bring you in to figure those things out. Or maybe they've gotten large enough where somebody's like, ask them in a customer questionnaire, hey, do you have an IR team? Well, yes, we have Bob, who also is the janitor, but he does work IR as well. The metrics that need to be generated, I don't know how you would show effectiveness for your threat hunting. And like most things with security, they only notice us when something goes wrong, right? If 1,000 times we will drive down the road and nothing will happen, and that's security. We're only, they only notice us the one time we get into an accident. How do you show effectiveness of threat hunting? Well, we didn't get hacked today, or we tracked these 15 issues, or we've reduced our risk. I mean, how would you, for somebody who might be trying to stand up a threat hunting team internally or something, they've got to show their effectiveness, or they're not going to get money. They're not going to get noticed by management. So in your opinion, how would you create metrics for those kinds of things? And I imagine it's kind of difficult.
It is. So threat hunting metrics are hard because, success isn't always about finding something. It's oh, hey, we found this evil thing. Sometimes, again, back to what we were saying, it's nothing.
Right.
Effectiveness can show up in reducing false positives. So remember how we were talking about how all of those alerts were,
Right.
300, criticals. The threat hunting can help tune those, right? Because we've gotten to the point of, hey, we've determined that all of this is normal, right? And so the value that we're gaining out of finding out the normal, we start seeing less alarms and less fatigue, and our mental health of our teams and the stress of our teams becomes more sustainable. And so the investment there is, maybe we actually don't need another staff member. Maybe we just have alert fatigue.
Right. Right.
I'm always a proponent of more people's sometimes better.
Right.
But and I'll always pick a person before I'll pick a tool. But we can show a return on investment from a lot of those metrics by changing how many things that are actually getting falsely identified. And so good detections, right? Hey, we
Right.
saw these metrics of these detection signatures, and they were valid. Like they were
Right.
actually did catch things. And so versus showing a presentation at like a quarterly meeting where we're just saying, hey, we're seeing these many alarms and alerts, but they were all benign and nothing.
Right.
That's
Right.
essentially then also devaluing the team by saying we're seeing these alerts and alarms. I can talk alerts and alarms. But there's really no value to the organization. Otherwise, it's just scaring people, right? And
Right.
that's not good security practices.
Right.
Simple things are better. So having visibility where there's gaps and identifying those gaps, and hey, we saw that you guys mitigated this through this untraditional mitigation for vulnerability management, and we tested it, and then you're actually being able to provide, here's what the attack would, doing a purple team, right? And hunting with that red team of actually showing, here's what the attack would have looked like, or hey, we're seeing blocks, and this is actually, if it would have gotten through, this is the type of noise that it would have been made.
Right.
So there's definitely a partnership that can be created from a red team there, and then being that second side of, hey, the red team tested the mitigation, they got through, and here's where we found them. Right. And so that's where that purple team concept comes in. And now we're creating something that's a very new concept, really.
Right.
It's not something that a lot of teams are doing, is actually mitigating something, going in and actually testing it with a red team. And then what does it look like? Even if it should be failed and it was an attempt, it should be valued as it was a failed attempt of an attacker. And so leveraging a lot of those into metrics and building that in a report concept, I think definitely can show return on investment for threat hunting capabilities.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, especially like it sounds like, threat hunting will cross a lot of, and I think we saw that with the flower. It's like you got incident response, you've got all
Yep.
those folks, you got your SOC, you got your monitoring. So some of this stuff can be like cross team goals, or if
Yep.
IR is like, hey, our response times are garbage. Well, why is that? Well, it's because it's hard to identify where these things are located, or where that data is, or whatever. So some of the threat hunting can be setting up, maybe it's not threat hunting directly, but it's things that would help you with threat hunting, like your mise en place. In cooking, you have your mise en
Yeah,
place. You have your
exactly.
ingredients all set here, really easily and within your reach, and you're reaching over and finding other things. So, setting up centralized logging, setting up an inventory of software that you might have, or hardware, like if you have Cisco and Fortinet kit, you get something in the mail, or you see a news article or a tweet where somebody says, hey, I found an O-Day in Cisco. You'd be like, oh crap, I've got Cisco. Maybe I should go and check and see what this is all about. Some of that is
Right.
hunting.
Well,
So to add to that, oh, go ahead, please.
so that was a big thing that I want to call out on where threat hunting has its huge value is, let's say there's a 0 day, right? So I remember I was working for an organization, and we didn't have EDR on a system on a 0 day. And the one thing that happens with 0 days is when one thing happens, it's probably going to be a more advanced level of that vulnerability to come out. Let's take a concept, and we're just going to have an example. Print Nightmare or Log4j, right? These big gnarly things.
Oh, yeah.
And let's say there wasn't an EDR on a system, and we have the capability of patching these things and mitigating these things. We can change all the settings and do all this stuff. But these researchers are changing quicker than we're able to mitigate the risk, right? So 2 days go by and we now have a new vector for the style of attack. That's where threat hunting fits in. It's in the gaps. And so, hey, we're not able to patch that quickly, or maybe there isn't even a patch that's out, but we have a 0 day. There's no patchable thing. The mitigation is shut off the internet, right? So lock ports down and put network segmentation up. That's where threat hunting comes in, right? There's no signatures maybe available, but we know what evil looks like to this system because we know what good looks like. And so, having that concept of being able to pick up where, you're going to have a gap, that's where the value is for sure. On 0 days, especially super value on 0 days.
Right.
So anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. When you're doing threat hunting, do you offer recommendations? Like you mentioned, you're hunting things with like TTP. So, we're not blocking egress, right? If something just spontaneously makes a connection out without having any connection coming in, Mick Douglas, our good friend, Better Safety Net, has mentioned this quite a bit. Monitor your egress, monitor your ingress, so that way when you can see those connections or connections that should be going, bidirectional. And I know that Mr. Betcher has he developed some tooling for creating better logs across your Windows systems. But one of the questions I have on the list there was, how much is tool making like you have to build it yourself? And if so, is Python a necessary tool set that you have to probably have now as a threat hunter to be able to make those tools, or should we just hope that those tools automatically exist with proper searching of the internet?
There's a mixture, right? I end up writing a lot of tools myself, whether it be in Python or PowerShell. I mean, we're all going pull tools together too.
Right.
Like I'll create a Swiss Army knife. Like I'm very well known on my team for, hey, we have these 5 tools and we need to make it simple to put them together. And we'll just, I'll pull in a bunch of variables and we'll do the thing, and it'll just now, versus running 5 different tools, we'll have one.
Right.
I think a big thing there is, just as we do threat intel, we should also be doing intelligence for hunting capabilities and community-driven projects. So knowing that, hey, the Zimmerman toolkit and doing training philosophies and things like that, and researching tools that aid for threat hunting capabilities and logging capabilities, I think is definitely a big factor. I don't think it's necessarily a requirement that you are a fluent coder. You don't need to know assembly to be a threat hunter, right? That's just not a thing. Does it help? Yeah. Does reverse engineering skills, right, help with being a threat hunter? Yeah, it does. But is that a requirement to be successful? No. I don't believe that it is, right?
Cool.
So yeah, I think that there are enough community tools and enough of a community to seek after to be able to aid you there personally. I don't know, Brian, if you agree on this, but I think there's definitely a place, and when you are ready, you will all of a sudden get a desire to build a tool because one doesn't exist. And so it'll be out of need.
Right. Mr. Betcher, you built your tool out of kind of a necessity, didn't you?
Yeah, there was nothing really in the industry that did this, and even things like Carbon Black, very noisy, expensive, And Carbon Black came out of a need to, well, Windows wasn't really logging the things that it needed to
Right.
in order to threat hunt, in order to verify that this machine is compromised. And that's the whole reason Carbon Black was invented, is to actually, create these logs. And then with the advent of, I guess it was Windows XP, um, all of a sudden Windows put that embedded into the operating system, but they didn't turn it on by default, right? So the tool that I built was to help people turn these things on, you know, because no one knew how. And
Right.
so it would actually dig into the system and say, hey, turn this on, turn this on, turn this on, do these audit logs, things like that. And so now you could then begin to see the things you needed to in order to threat hunt properly.
That's fantastic. Awesome. Um, well, I think we hit all of the questions that we had on the list here. I added a few later on, and that was, the one things I think you've already covered in your slides. So, um, any last thoughts on threat hunting? And I would also like to encourage if you want to share how people can get a hold of you. Any final thoughts and how to contact you.
Yeah. Discord is usually the best. So just join the Discord and hit me up there through Blue Team Village Discord. Um, uh, my email is pretty easy. It's kainu@kainu.codes. So,
Right on.
um, so my last piece of advice is if you are not currently a threat hunter, there is an industry that needs this. Proactive security is definitely going to be a worthwhile venture for you, your organizations, and all of our future. As it is a part of maturity in a cybersecurity program. So having a team that's then capable of hunting. I love seeing people move from incident response into threat hunting because they know what the evil looks like, or red teamers that go over into threat hunting. But don't let that intimidate you. I've seen some of the best threat hunters come out of system engineers and domain admins. That's frankly, that's my background of
Right.
being a system engineer and sysadmin. I know how these systems work. I know the commands and I know the behaviors that they have. And that really comes down to aiding you. So please just try the gamified learnings, try a CTF, go review logs, right? Just go and look at things. Maybe ask a friend to go throw out or a coworker, if you're familiar with ICAR files for like test malware files, go throw an ICAR file somewhere and then go try to find it. Right. So do some of these tests and see where these things are, and go see what that 1116 is. So yeah,
Very cool.
good
And
luck.
that was great. Yeah, I appreciate that. I've got some more resources where I can go and play around with this stuff. Maybe at some point we can do some stuff on stream on our Tuesdays and Friday stream about just hunting, checking log files and things. And
Yeah.
yeah, cool. All right. So, Mr. Betcher, it's a pleasure as always,
Yeah.
sir. How would people find you or get a hold of you if they wanted to talk more about threat hunting, or the tool you created to help make it more easy to threat hunt?
Yeah, LinkedIn is good. You can find me, online.
Okay. All right.
Just do some hunting, right? And I just have one more thing to add. If you don't know what things are that were talked about today, like Evil Gen X, maybe you've never heard of it before. Ask the AI, like, uh, explain it. How do I detect it? How might I prevent it? What are some things I should do if I do detect it? And you can start there also.
Okay.
If you are, say, a sysadmin or something like that.
Very
Yeah.
nice. Good thinking, sir.
Yeah, if anybody wants to see how that tool is actually run, there is a phenomenal video that John Hammond has put out on his podcast. Not to call him out, sorry,
No, please, please.
but he does a phenomenal demonstration of Evil Jinx a couple years ago, and it's a really good way to see the attacker's lens on a lot of this. So a lot of threat hunting comes down to understanding how the attackers work and think so that you can do blue, right?
Yep.
And that is really a huge help.
I think this is the one. I posted it into the channel now. I also posted up on YouTube. It's him looking like a computer guy or something.
Yes.
I think that's it. So you can go check that out. Yes, he looks like he's from the Matrix or something.
Yep, that's
cool.
exactly it.
Well, that's it. Awesome. So, Kainu, thank you so much for coming and hanging out tonight. Thank you for the flexibility. And I hope you will continue to give talks. Are you going to be at other conferences coming up, or maybe somewhere else making appearances on podcasts or streams?
Yeah. So there is some local conferences that I'll be found at. There is a local Midwest conference. I'm not going to throw out the name. If you find me, you'll find me. But I'll be speaking there. Security conference. And then hopefully Blue Team Village has asked me to come back. So I will be aiding there next year for the Project Obsidian CTF, and also hopefully for a request speaking again next year at Defcon.
Fantastic. So go to any Midwest conference and might have a Blue Team Village and ask for kainu. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. He's attracted to it like a moth to a flame. So you just and he'll be there. Just go look for it. Anyway, Miss Berlin is literally, she messaged us about an hour before the show and said she was just leaving Blue Team Con. So hopefully some of you got to go see her up in the Chicago area. Also, I just want to echo her happiness and joy of being able to go to DEF CON and have the mental health village. So big shout out and thanks to the Blue Team Village folks for helping out and spreading mental health awareness at DEF CON. So yeah, I got one of those too. So yeah, very nice.
Blurred, but
it's an excellent challenge coin. There it is. That was an excellent challenge coin. One of the largest ones I've got, as a matter of fact. I mean, it's a nice size. Yeah.
I've got the other little one back here in the cage.
Yeah.
It's floating up there, the nice metal one that they have, but this was the big plexiglass one that they've got. So love these guys.
Yeah, but yeah, just like I said, Blue Team Village folks, pure class, helping out with the mental health and bringing awareness to mental health and mental health hackers. So thank you all for making that happen and making that, and hopefully that'll happen again next year. And a lot of people got some real good benefit from that. So anyway, I think we're gonna go. And thank you again, Kainu, Mr. Betcher. Again, always is a pleasure, sir. And I was Brian, and that's it for breaking down security and BreakSec education this week. Hope you all have a good week. Everything is nice and quiet, and that you take care of yourselves. Because as we're fond of saying around here, you're the only you have. Okay? We'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
See you.
Bye-bye.